in terms of, how bad the traffic is and the numbers and so forth.
All right. We are at 7 o'clock on the dot Central Time, 5 p.m. Pacific Time. We are welcoming on both platforms. Hello, everyone from Facebook. Hello, everyone on Zoom. Great to see it. I see the attendee list climbing. This is a friend of ours and probably new to a lot of wine drinkers, Paul McSherry from Maze Wines. And we are going to talk with Paul for the next hour. We'll probably squeeze in some stuff about wine. Otherwise, it's going to be rugby. We'll be discussing Paul's favorite cricket teams and anything else from across the pond. But Paul, why don't you say hello to the group and introduce yourself and actually let us know where you are sitting right now, town, location, etc.
Okay, great. Hi, guys. Thank you all for joining us. Really do appreciate your time. I know we're all so busy, kind of running around. Oh, no, we're not anymore. So yeah, I'm home here in Napa. This is where I live full time. Obviously, I don't sound, so Napa. I'm from Europe originally. I'm Irish, but grew up in London. But I'm here in Napa right now. I'm the owner of Maze Wines, which we're going to taste today. So I want to thank the guys. I want to thank Denise and Martin for having me. We worked together last year on something, and it was fantastic to work with the guys. I think it's such a wonderful cause to put two great things together, charity and wine. And when the guys reached out to me to be involved in this, I said, absolutely, I'd love to be part of it. So thank you all for being here, and I hope you enjoy the next kind of hour of our company.
Likewise, and I'm going to salute you on that because we're thrilled to have you. So cheers, and I see you've got some red.
As we say in Ireland, Sláinte.
Sláinte. That's right. Now, let's talk a little bit Ireland, because you said you grew up in London, but you were born, I believe, in County Sligo?
No, my parents live in County Sligo now. So my father is originally from Sligo. I was born in Dublin, and I moved to the UK when I was 4. My father's job took us over there. He was in advertising. So I did most of my schooling, well, all of my schooling, I should say, and university and so forth in the UK. And then when I graduated from college, I moved back to Ireland, back to Dublin. But my parents, when they retired in the UK, they moved back to Sligo. So they're on the west coast of Ireland, Sligo.
So it's west and north, correct?
Yes. So we are just north of, a lot of people, they might not be familiar with Sligo. It's a small county, beautiful county, but a small county. We're just north of Galway, which is, something that people might know. It's, that would be one of the bigger cities in Ireland. So.
Well, I think golfers might be familiar with it because there's a little track there. Is it Country Club of Sligo? That is it's 120 plus years old, Colt design. They've got there's some golf courses right now.
Oh, absolutely. The village that my parents live in, it's called Ross's Point, and it's just out on the ocean. It's right on the Atlantic Ocean. It's beautiful. About 10 miles out of Sligo city, Sligo town. And it's actually where Rory, what's his name?
Graham McDowell.
No, not Graham McDowell. Rory McIlroy, sorry. It's where he won his first amateur golf tournament. And he went on, obviously, to do great things, and he's still doing great things. So yeah, it's a beautiful course, and it's beautiful because it's a links course, so it's right on the ocean, and you're on the cliffs and you're looking out onto the water and so forth. And, we can't always promise you great weather in Sligo when you're golfing, but as my dad always says, it never rains in the pub. So
it never rains in the pub. I'm actually using that.
Always good weather in the pub.
Always good weather in the pub. And for those of you that are just joining us, it's Golf Talk with Paul and Martin. Actually, it's interesting because you said you were born in Dublin and you moved to London when you were 4.
Yeah.
And fast forward to when you were 21, came out of university and you wanted to get a job. What did you want to get a job in?
So I did a media degree at university. I don't know if it was necessarily because it was something I was chasing a career in. I think it was something I was familiar with because, as I said, my dad was in advertising. So it was just something that I grew up around, and it felt somewhat familiar to me. So I did a media degree, and then even after college, I still wasn't exactly sure what I wanted to do. But with the media degree, I figured, well, go into advertising, and if anything else, you'll get paid for a few years until you really figure out what you want to do.
Right, until you grow up.
Yeah, so right, exactly. So I worked in advertising for a few years before this kind of segue into wine. But that led me into kind of getting into wine. I would go to these client dinners with other members of the firm. But I was definitely this lowly kind of new young guy who was really just there to sit at the end of the table and take notes at these dinners, these corporate dinners. But I noticed quite quickly that the guy that was choosing the wine for the dinner, he had everyone's attention for about 10 minutes. He'd say, "Oh, what do you like to drink, or what are you eating?" And he'd figure out what everyone was going to drink, and he was kind of commanding the attention. So I said, "I need to be that guy." So I did. I kind of went away, and still, this was nothing to do with trying to make a career in wine. It was more, this is how I get my voice heard in advertising. I want to be that guy on the table at the dinners.
Shocking.
So
Shocking. An Irish guy that wants to be the center of attention. I mean, that
Go
is.
figure.
Let me take a moment to say hello to a couple people.
Yep.
I see some of the Marcella's on, the one who rules the roost. I see a gentleman that I'm just going to refer to as Counselor. Counselor on, and Counselor plays a lot of professional basketball, or he did. He's 6'3", 6'9" with the afro, but Counselor, welcome to the show this evening. And so you decided that guy at the table that has the wine list has everybody's attention for about a 7 to 10 minute period. And you were sitting in the back of the wings at the table, kind of as a fly in the wall, if you will, but you decided, I want to learn a little bit about wine and command some attention.
Absolutely. No one really took me seriously. I was young. I was just out of college. I was the note taker. So I thought, I want to kind of fast track, my progression through this industry. So I need to get people's attention. So I went off and I kind of researched it, and I said, how do I learn about wine? And I found the WSET, which is the Wine and Spirits Education Trust. And I started doing night classes in that, and it was fantastic. I knew really nothing about wine before that. I knew what I liked to drink, and I didn't drink that much wine, to be honest. My family were always into it, my parents. So when we went on holidays, I remember as kids, there would always be, we'd go to restaurants, and my parents would be, buying these different wines, and that was kind of fascinating. But of course, we were too young to drink them. It kind of sparked an interest, and I started doing these courses, and then I suppose I realized that I was probably more into it than I realized. And it wasn't just tasting the wines. For me, it was the history of wine, and it was, the backstory. And, I just found it fascinating. I was always a bit of a history geek in school anyway. So the fact that wine, the winemaking side of things and the production of wine goes back so far, and, there's so many different elements to it. I was fascinated, and I was kind of instantly hooked. And I went as far as I could with the WSETs up to advanced level. And then eventually left advertising and kind of went on a limb and started my own importing business in Ireland.
Well,
so I was importing wines.
Let me back up 1 second, because you said you drank a lot of items in Ireland, but just not wine. So what did you grow up drinking?
I mean, beer. There you go, yeah. Kind of hit the nail on the head there. I'm very jealous.
Ireland's greatest export, some would argue, is in fact their black wine.
It's funny, actually. I was doing a pub quiz, like an online virtual pub quiz with some friends the other day. Some guys from back in London, guys I've known for a long, long time. I went to school with them, actually. And that was one of the questions in the last round. It was, obviously, where's Guinness originally from? You couldn't just say Dublin. You had to say exactly where. So, St. James's Gate.
James Gate, yep.
Yep. And then it was, who was the founder? Arthur Guinness, of course. And then the final question was, and what year was it founded? I got it wrong. I knew it was 250 years. I couldn't remember if it was 2011 or 2009 that we celebrated 250 years. And I got it wrong, and my friend got it right. And we were on this virtual quiz, and it was 1759. I said 1761. And he said, Paul, how don't you know that? And I said, what do you mean? And he said, I was with you. We celebrated it together. I was visiting from London. I said, oh, God, I feel terrible now.
You could just tell him that's how much that your visit left an impression on me.
Right, yeah, exactly. Yeah. I was enjoying Guinness that much that night. Yeah. No,
it is interesting, because the food and wine and culture scene for Ireland was lacking, I think many would say, for decades. It has exploded in the 2000s, and some of the chefs and everything like that are now coming out of Ireland are pretty famous. And that kind of coincides with the new wine. Is that accurate?
Sorry, I lost a little bit there.
It's kind of the explosion of the food and culinary scene and wine scene in Ireland in the 2000s coincided with when you started a wine import business.
I mean, yeah, obviously it must have been all down to me. No, obviously not.
I don't think that's a coincidence.
It's interesting. Ireland now is a different place to the island, I don't remember Ireland as a 2-3-year-old when I lived there. I remember Ireland going back, even though I lived in the UK from 4 up until 21, basically. We would always go back in summers, at Christmases, Easter holidays, whenever we had school holidays or college holidays, we'd go back. But yeah, I mean, it's changed so much and it's evolved so much in terms of wine appreciation, food, like you said, the food culture there has just completely changed. I mean, now Dublin is such a multicultural city. It's fantastic. It's such a great place to visit. And, there's new restaurants opening up. Every time I go back maybe, certainly not as much as I would like to. I go back every Christmas. I love Christmas. And it's one of those times I'll always go back. But I try to get back once in the summer as well, if I can. But every time I go back, there's new bars opening up, there's new restaurants, it's a flourishing place, and it's great to see that. And even things like, going to the pub, which is such a normal thing for Irish people, I guess. I remember 10 years ago, it was that short history. It was 10 years ago, you'd go to the pub and there'd be, 3 or 4 different beer taps. There'd be always Guinness, of course. Probably 2 of them. I
was going to say there's 3 or 4. 3 of them are Guinness. The other one is just someone trying to get their label in.
Right. And then there was always Carlsberg, because they had a brewery in Dublin. There was always Heineken and Budweiser, believe it or not. But then, every time I go back now, there's all these new taps and there's, all these craft beers that are getting brewed there. And it's fantastic. And, even with spirits, there was always 3 main distilleries in Ireland. There was the Bushmills distillery up in Northern Ireland. There was the Jameson distillery in Dublin and Middleton in Cork. And some of the smaller whiskey distillers would make their whiskey or their products there. But now there's just this massive, growth of craft whiskey making and craft spirit making. And there's all these new labels popping up everywhere, which is, to me, fantastic.
Right.
And not just that, gin, vodka. I mean, it's exploded. It's brilliant. And it's great to see that,
No, you're right. I mean, the Celtic Tiger thing and the youngest tech sector in the world at one point in time, and it was exploding. And I love to see it because it is now multicultural, multinational, and fun. You spent most of your years in the UK. Mm-hmm. You opened up a business with your father. Oddly enough, if the story I hear is correct, you designed the business over a couple pints of Guinness.
Somewhat. Well, actually, we came up with a name of one of our Cabernet Sauvignons over a couple of pints of Guinness. Actually, it was our kind of, I hate to use the word reserve, but I suppose we call it our top end cab, our small production cab, our Clou Cabernet Sauvignon, which all comes from Coombsville. That came up. We came up with that over a couple of pints of Guinness in an Irish pub in Sonoma. So what had happened was, when we first started the business, myself and my father, we started in 2009. I'd come over and done a harvest, and I was working with Mark Harold, great winemaker. And I was in love with.
Connect those dots for a sec. So you came over in 2009. You had a import business of wine in the UK.
In Ireland. It was based in Dublin.
Okay, based in Dublin. And so you got into it and you decided, let's make an import business, Dad, in Ireland, which is not known for its wine. We're going to import from South Africa, Australia, other parts of Europe and California. Mm-hmm. And then what year did you found the business in Ireland?
Believe it or not, it was the same year, 2009. Talk about doing everything at once, yeah.
Seriously, holy cow. And then you decided, let's, forget this. I need to get over to California and get my feet in the ground and get my hands dirty, or what prompted you to come over to California?
Yeah, I mean, really coming out to California to do that harvest, I had done all as I spoke about it earlier on a little bit, WSET courses, and I'd done all this theoretical stuff and, done all of my exams in that and got those qualifications, and that was great and it was fantastic and I learned so much. But I really wanted to see what the physical side of winemaking was like, for nothing more than just when I was going to be selling wine in Ireland, I could, if someone ever asked me some obscure question, I could say, well, actually, I know what it's like because I actually made wine for a harvest, and this is why we did this, or this is why I did that. It was more just to add, as my dad would always say, to add another string to your bow. So that was kind of the thinking behind that. But then when I came over, I just completely fell in love with it. I completely fell in love with winemaking and that physical side of it. And I had this opportunity to buy some fruit, a really small amount of fruit, and I kind of called my dad, and he had recently retired, shall we say? So I think my mum was kind of getting a bit fed up of him being around the house too much. And she said, oh, Paul, if there's anything you can do just to kind of, get him out of my sides for a little bit, that'd be great.
Spouses and moms, you have to
Right, yeah. So I called him and I said, hey, Dad, how would you think about making our own wine? And he said, well, not really sure that's what you went out there for, but okay, tell me a bit more. And I said, small numbers. And my intention then was, this is something we're going to probably import all back to Ireland and we'll distribute it ourselves. It's just something that will add to our portfolio and it'll be, it's nothing that's going to be a huge business. It's more of a, just a little side project for us. But, the more I was kind of doing that and spending time out here and working in the vineyards and working in the winery, like I said, I fell in love with it. So we started making more and more each year, and that's when I moved out full time in 2011 when we bottled our first vintage. And I decided we've got wine to sell now, and I'd rather do it here than ship it all back to Ireland. I actually want to make a business out of this and try to make a go of it. So we kind of grew slowly. We didn't want to get into a situation, which you can do with wine because it's a massively expensive business to get into in the first place. Especially in somewhere like America. So we grew slowly and, measured. It was very a measured approach to how we did it.
Well, and you're not actually huge now, so that's good. Small and slow is, slow and steady wins the race, so to speak.
Yeah.
I want to connect the dot between WSET Level 3, which is a tremendous amount of education for those folks on that don't recognize the skill level required to attain that certificate. And really, there's a lot of history. There's a lot of practical exams and things like that, assessment, clinical or technical type of nature of wine assessment. And for those of you just joined, all I am half, if I'm not, half the production crew is drinking 2015 Maze Cabernet. FYI, there's 3 bottles of the Maze Cabernet left on Cellar Angels site. 3. So if you like the 2015, you are going to want to grab those during the conversation because they aren't going to last at the end of the hour. And Paul, what is the drinking window of the 2015?
I mean, I suppose it all comes down to how you cellar it. If it's in the right conditions, if you keep it, in a place where it's nice and cool, nice and dark, a bit of humidity, there is nothing to say this wine shouldn't cellar for 15 plus years. I mean, it can go longer. Paul, I don't know yet, obviously, but I'm still drinking. I drank a bottle of our 2009, which is our inaugural vintage, our very first vintage, the other day, and it was drinking fantastic, and it was better than I've ever tasted it. So that's what.
You're on with the Cellar Angels. They know how to cellar. We have no wine stored in our garages or in our furnaces, so they all have their own refrigerators, and some of them have wine cellars that have thousands of bottles. So 55 degrees, perfect humidity. So at least 15, 20 years is what you're saying.
Absolutely. I mean, I would certainly say that. Like I said, like I was just saying about my 2009, we're 11 years after I produced that wine, and it was tasting great. And it still was tasting young to me, not young in the sense that all I was getting was fruit and alcohol, but young in the sense that it had so much more to give. There was going to be so many more flavors coming through. We were getting some of the secondary flavors, but there was definitely more coming from it, and it definitely could certainly do with even more time, or it would still give more over time.
Right.
And so one of the things when I first started making wine that was kind of important to me was I wanted to make a wine that was approachable when it was bottled, so you could open it and you could drink it, but also it was something that could age, which is kind of difficult to do and have both at the same time, because some people like their wines younger. They want that fruit, and they want that's what they want as their the first component and the main component in their wines. But then of course there's other people that don't. They want something that's coming from those secondary flavors. So it's trying to find that happy medium. So.
And a couple, I want to say hello to a couple more people that have jumped on. First of all, Jeff and Jane, hello, and Pam. Thank you so much for all the help. Can't wait to talk to you again soon. And also Nelson and his lovely bride are on. I'm sorry? The booth is yelling in my ear. Liz is what they said. Liz. They all say hello. And now back to the 2009, you come over, you found a wine brand, and you have a level 3 certificate, highly educated, you have a wine import business that you just started, and you're coming over to Napa Valley, and obviously Napa, it's king and queen or Cabernet and Chardonnay, and you decide Cabernet. And so when you got here and you wanted to make Cabernet, where did you think you wanted to source fruit? How did you end up making that decision? And then that first year in 2009 through today, what is total production on average per vintage?
Okay.
There's like 7 questions there.
Yeah, no, it's fine. So in terms of fruit sourcing, from when we first started, that was very much kind of suggested by my consultant at the time. So I, like I said, it was my first ever time making wine. I had so much to learn. I still have so much to learn, but at that point, certainly I had a lot to learn. And Mark Harold was our consultant at the time. He was the guy that kind of taught me how to make wine. And
wait, how did we time out? That's like saying I started talking with Michael Jordan because I wanted to open up a basketball camp. Mark Harold is, how on earth did you get connected to Mark Harold as an Irishman just coming over to Napa?
It's a great, it's I feel like I have these hugely lucky, scenarios that I found myself in. A lot of people will say, you've worked hard, or you've done this, or, that's why you managed to do this or that. I think it's not. I think it's complete serendipity. I found myself in these amazing circumstances. I had lots of great opportunities. I had a father who was happy to kind of back me and back my dream and financially help me, because I certainly couldn't have done it myself. I found myself in this position where I was doing my first harvest with someone like Mark Harold, who is this incredible icon in Napa winemaking, and especially Cabernet Sauvignon winemaking. Yeah. And he took me under his wing, and he just said, you seem to really want to do this, and I really want to help you, and I can give you access to great, vineyards and great barrel producers. And for me, it was just, I couldn't get my head around it. I said, well, why do you want to help me so much? And he said, well, you just seem like you really love it. And I said, well, I do, but surely that's not enough. And, I remember in my second harvest, in 2010, our second vintage, I was at the winery. It was a custom crush facility, so there was other winemakers making their wines there, other brands that are kind of smaller but didn't have their own facility. And I remember people coming up to me, and it was the day that some of our barrels were getting delivered from this producer called Darnajou, which is just incredible barrels. But they make a very limited supply of barrels for the whole world. I think at the time they were making maybe 100 barrels just for America. That's it, 100 barrels. So anyways, this guy came up to me. He's been making wine for a long time, like 10 years plus, his own brand, and then consulting for other wineries and so forth. And he said, I don't know who has got this new brand. It's Maize. Who are Maize? And he said, how have they got these barrels? I've been trying to get these barrels for 10 years. I'm standing next to him. I'm like, we shouldn't say anything. So I was like, oh, I don't know. I don't know who Maize is, but yeah, that must be rough.
That is hysterical.
I just didn't want to give it away. I was like, oh God, this guy's going to be really offended if I say they're mine.
No, but I don't know who it is, but you better watch him. That person's going to be on fire in a couple of years. And so you meet Mark, which again, and by the way, someone can look this up, but I think it was Seneca, the great Stoic, that said, luck is when preparation meets opportunity.
And yeah, that sounds pretty apt, actually. It sounds like it makes a lot of sense, especially in my situation.
Yeah, could be the wine talking. I just, you never know.
No, it does. It sounds right. And like I always use the word serendipity. It's being in the right place at the right time, and it's one of those things. And it did. It was that's what made it for me. I don't think my wine journey, or I hate to use the word success, but how things have panned out for me, should we say, would be the same without that first initial meeting and us working together, and the mutual understanding we had about what we want to produce and how the wine should taste and everything else. I'm not so sure I could have done that with anyone else at that time. So
it's tough, and I like the word serendipity, and you're right. It does. It is another example of which this industry, specifically that valley, is famous for, where you have an underling, if you will, that's coming in that is quote unquote wet behind the ears, but has an insatiable passion to do this. And the old guard, they recognize it and they are happy. I've heard stories of Tom Rinaldi, who was the great Merlot crafter at Duckhorn, that has pulled aside people and says, you're interested in making Merlot, I think I can help you. I've been doing it for roughly 5 decades. And they will just mentor that individual And it sounds like Mark took a liking to you there. And one of the things that I'm fascinated by is, one, how much fruit or what was your production the first couple of years? And then Mark was the one that got you access to that very famous vineyard. Is that correct?
Yeah, Mark got us access to all the vineyards that we are currently in, and we haven't changed. We've been in the same vineyards since the very beginning. You know, our maize cab, which we're tasting, that's all coming from Stagecoach. We have 2 plots up there. One, there you go. One on the Pritchard Hill side, one on the Atlas Peak side, and we blend the 2 together. So, you know, I always say it's a single vineyard wine, but it can be somewhat misleading because this vineyard is so massive. You know, it encompasses 3 different AVAs. You know, Oakville, Pritchard Hill, and Atlas Peak. But we have these 2 different plots, which are very different, and they produce very different flavor profiles and so forth. But they just marry together, and I think just give a great and just a fantastic overall expression as the vineyard as a whole. So we've been working with them since the very beginning, and it started out, we were buying from different blocks. In the first couple of vintages, we had, Mark and I had discussed, they had just kind of released, what it was, it's hard to explain. It was very rocky, this vineyard. So they had blown out huge portions with dynamite of this vineyard and made it available for planting. And we planted 2 different blocks, in 2010. So we didn't start getting fruit from them until really 2012, 2013. And that started going into our wines then. We were buying from other blocks in the vineyard, very close to where they were. So it was still the same vineyard, but just different blocks. And then we started using our own blocks, and we tell them how we want it farmed. And you know, we have those decisions and picking decisions, of course. But yeah, the maize is completely Stagecoach, and it has been from the start. The Clue, which is our other cab, sorry.
No, and I mean, Stagecoach has always held a near and dear place for me personally in wine. It's one of those heralded vineyards, vaulted vineyards. And to give people an idea, you talked about it covering 3 AVAs. The vineyard or the property itself is massive. I think it's something in the vicinity of total property is like 1,350 acres, but there's about 500 to 600 acres under vines. And a lot of it is to your point, very rocky, steep hillsides. And it's almost like you just took a quilt and threw it on a mountainside, and you have all of this tapestry of specific vineyard blocks. Some are eastern facing, some have higher elevation, some are on the valley, and it's just this beautiful, gorgeous, undulating tapestry of vineyards that the Krupp brothers did very well in securing in the 80s, and then sadly, well, not sadly for them, but selling it to a small company that goes by E&J something, but they.
Just a small company, yeah.
A wee bit of a company. But I think it is interesting because you get such diversity up there, and the soil types. It's crazy. So I really applaud you being able to get that in your first couple vintages, or from now until then. And as I said, before you go on and I ask you another question, Denise is going to ask the audience a question. We're going to poll the audience, and don't worry about the 2015 being gone, because we're going to have the 2016 available over the weekend. So here's our first question: who has given themselves a do-it-yourself haircut while quarantined? Paul or Martin? Paul's got a. Paul has a wickedly thick lock there that I
actually have given myself a haircut.
Oh, you can't say anything. We've got.
Sorry. I thought we were.
Oh, hang on. You can't reveal the answers.
Oh, God,
let's get up over. We're at 66% of the people have voted. Let's see what we've got here. One more vote. Who's got one more vote? All right, we're gonna end it in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. I have what, 6, or I've got 60%, you've got 38%. And the irony is I did not know you had given yourself a haircut. I got a haircut this week in quarantine. I didn't give it to myself. Did you give yourself a haircut?
I did, yeah.
Holy smoke. I had Denise give me a haircut, and it was 45 minutes of white knuckled hair.
Well, I mean, I didn't do much. I kind of just did the sides and the back. And I did it hoping that my thinking was, I can't see the back, and no one else is going to see it because I'm stuck in the house. So it's fine. As long as the sides look all right when I'm looking in the mirror, that's okay.
Let me, tell me, I'm not letting you stop talking until you tell me production from 2010 on.
Sorry, yes. So our first vintage in 2009 was 220 cases, and it was just the Maize Cab, which we're drinking today, the Maize from Stagecoach. In 2010, I introduced a second Cabernet label. I say 2010, it was a 2010 vintage, obviously not bottled in 2012, called Clue, which is from Coombsville, we can get back to that and talk about the story about getting the name for that. But in that first vintage, there was probably, I want to say 100 cases. And then we introduced the Sauvignon Blanc, that vintage as well, 2010, first vintage, about 70 cases, very small. So it kind of grew gradually. And now we're up to our biggest vintage to date was our 2018. So the vintage we're just about to bottle in a few months' time. And that's going to be about 1,000 cases of maize and 250 cases of Clue. And it worked out at about 250 cases of Sauvignon Blanc, maybe.
Wow.
So, yeah, I mean, still small in the grand scheme of things, but that's kind of where I want to tail out on. I always said to myself, it's gone a bit over what I expected, but then 2018 was a bigger vintage in terms of yields, not just for me, but across the board for everyone. But I had said to myself years ago, 1,000 cases of Cab is where I want to kind of tail out for this brand. You know, I want to keep it really small. You know, it's not that I can't get fruit from other vineyards and more fruit sources, but I don't want to. I love the recipe we have, as it were. You know, I love the vineyards we use. I don't think I want to add anything to it. I just want to keep it the way it is, and I want to keep the character of the wines. So I think, you know, this will be our biggest vintage. It will go down again for sure this year. 18 was just a bumper vintage. We haven't had the rains like we did then earlier in the year, which would add to the, you know, to the yields. We had a very dry year so far. We've had a little bit of rain, but it hasn't been significant. I don't think our yields would be anywhere as big as 18, and 19 wasn't as big as 18 either. So
one of the things that's always fascinating is textbook and applying it to the vineyard and the dirt. So you had the level 3 certificate, and then you go to make wine. Mm-hmm. And you know, there's a difference between learning versus doing. So in that process, what was the steepest learning curve? Because you knew it conceptually, and you knew it from an education standpoint in wine production, making wine. I mean, you knew it from that standpoint, from the textbook side, but in putting it in practice, what was the steepest learning curve?
I mean, it was the technicality of the science that goes into winemaking, I think. And I was also very aware that a lot of these people, most of these people that are making wine, making these great wines, they've all gone to college and studied this. You know, this is their primary education. And I didn't want to appear as some, you know, young guy that's kind of turned up and thinks I know it all and whatever else. I kind of went by this amazing piece of advice that my father gave me years ago, which I still stick to this day. I still think it's, you know, one of the best pieces of advice to live by. And it's this, you know, we're all born with 2 ears and 1 mouth. Use it in that ratio. So that's kind of how I approach everything. I just soaked everything in. My dad said, when I first came out, he said, be a sponge, just soak everything up, soak as much as you could possibly soak up. That is your education. You haven't had the, you know, the same opportunities as these guys. You've gone off and you've done a different path at university, and you did a media degree, and, you know, you need to make up so much knowledge in a short space of time. So be the sponge and just soak it all up and just take in everything you can possibly take in. And luckily, you know, I was able to do that, and people were willing to kind of give me advice and talk to me about, you know, why they made a wine this way or why they made a wine that way. And, you know, that was great about when I started my first vintage in that custom crush facility, because it was great working with Mark, but there was also other winemakers that were working there as well, making their wines for themselves and their clients. So I was able to take their, you know, thoughts and processes and
right.
practices and in making wine, and kind of soak that up as well. And, you know, one of the guys that I met there, Mike Herbie, who was making wine for a couple of his clients at the time, is now become my consultant now. And he's a fantastic winemaker and a slightly different approach, but, you know, it was a seamless kind of segue into that. You know, Mark was pulling back from his consulting a little bit, and, you know, he was concentrating more on his own brands. And that was great, and that was fine, and I completely understood that. So we started working with a new consultant. You know, I still don't think I'm a fully fledged winemaker, even though I've been doing it a long time now. I've been doing it for over 10 years. I still think I've got so much more to learn, and I love having someone I can talk to and taste with and ask their opinions on. So this guy, Mike Hervey, who has his own brand, Reddick, which is fantastic. If you haven't tried it, but he came on board, and I've known him since the beginning, and he knew my approach, and he knew what I wanted to make. And, he was very kind of giving with his knowledge and open with his knowledge at the first as well. And I remember that first harvest, I would ask him questions. I felt like so bothersome to these people, I'm kind of asking them questions. And I know how busy they are, but he was just really willing to open up and say, well, I'm doing this for this reason, I'm doing that for that reason. And, it was so important to me just to soak up as much as I possibly could.
All right, let's put that winemaker WSET certificate to test. Let's do a little quick assessment on the 15.
Okay.
So he pours some more in his glass. I'll follow. I like his style. Do you want some?
No.
And we'll get back to the label because it truly is a maze. But so aromas, walk me through, do your technical assessment, eyes, nose.
Yeah, I mean, this is one thing that I always say to people that come, because we don't have a tasting room as such, so we do tastings by appointment only. So when people come up, they come up to the winery and we taste in the winery. You guys were there, obviously, in August when we did our first meeting and first interview, and we got together, and that was fantastic. But one thing I stress when people come up and taste, I think they expect to come up and be given this sheet of tasting notes, as you would in most tasting rooms. But for me, I have them on hand if they really, really, really want them. But I try and keep them away from them because I always think that tasting notes are what I taste. And that's my palate is very different to everyone else's. And, everyone in the world has a different palate, which I think is the beauty, one of the beauties of wine tasting. We all taste something different. But I think we can agree that there are certainly some things that probably most of us would find in common. So in the 15, what I would say is, it was the end of the drought years. So it was certainly the yields were lower, and we hadn't had rain in a long time. In 16, we had a bit of rain in the spring, so it kind of picked up again. But very concentrated, I would say. I would always say that we have, red currant and black currant, notes in our wines in the maize cab. Actually, this actually brings me up to a good friend of mine, Andy Welsh from Dallas, who I think is on.
I did see Andy Welsh on, yes.
Yeah, he's a very good friend of mine, and we've drank wine together many times, and he's come to visit me here, and I've spent time with him down in Dallas. So hi, Andy. But he did actually send me an email yesterday and said that he had some 13 maize, and he was going to be drinking that while we're doing this. So he said, could I give him a quick, just some thoughts on maybe what I tasted differently. So it kind of coincides anyway. So Andy, basically what I was thinking was the 13.
Hey, Paul, we'll go to commercial, and then you can just look at the camera and just talk to Andy.
Okay, so basically in the 15, what I'm getting is very concentrated flavors. So we're getting the red currant, we're getting the black currant, we're getting the dark red plums, but it's more like those preserves. Like it's like a red currant jam as opposed to just the red currants. It's more concentrated, not sweet, but just concentrated because of the heat, because of the lack of rain, the small production of wines. When you've got smaller clusters of grapes, they're sucking up all of that stuff from the vines. So it's getting more concentrated in these smaller clusters. So that's what I think the 15 was like. And I actually loved the 15. It was one of my favorite vintages.
And now compare that to the 13.
So the 13 was an incredible vintage, I think, as we all know. I think across the board, not just for ourselves, but for most wineries, 13 was a great vintage. But it was just, I don't think it was as concentrated. It was the same kind of fruit profile, I think, but just maybe a little bit more elegant. I think maybe this is more robust, just because of that, higher sugars when we picked, because of the heat and the lack of groundwater. Both fantastic wines and both similar fruit profiles, but just, like I said, 15 more concentrated, I think.
Well, I think it's interesting what you just talked about with regards to vineyard or a vintage variation. And when you're drinking mass-produced wines, there is no variation. It's going to taste the same every single weekend, every single year. It doesn't matter. And it's fascinating to me to see the influence of Mother Nature every single year in the small production wineries, because you really are beholden to what she throws at you. So you talk early frost, you talk early rains, you talk, low diurnal days, extended harvest. I mean, you're at the mercy from that standpoint of Mother Nature, and you try to make the best decisions possible. So congratulations on having some tremendous accolades, tremendous fruit sources. And we're not one, and you and I talked about this previously. Cellar Angels is not at all about points. Points to me, the last time I cared about points, back to our earlier conversation, I care about scores in golf while I'm playing golf.
I care about how bad my scores are in golf and how high they are.
Right. I care about it in football games or whatever. But for those of you that are concerned with points and what Paul's been able to accomplish, the 2015, I believe, is 94 points from Parker.
Yeah.
And there may not be 3 bottles left, so I'll stop saying that. The 2016, which we are going to have available because Paul was kind enough and gracious enough to say, I can make some available, but only through Sunday. The 2016 has 96 points from Parker. And we all know Parker, he loves the elegant, structured, depth, nuance, fruit, balanced wines. He likes them in Bordeaux. He likes them in Napa. And so 96 points is not easy to come by from Mr. Parker. That will conclude my discussion on points. But we are going to have another question right now. So here's a question for the audience. And Paul can't answer. Wait till we get to the end.
Okay.
Why is Stagecoach Vineyard so special to Paul? Answer number 1, Paul was born in a stagecoach. Paul was seeking the single best expression of Cabernet Sauvignon. Go big or go home. He wanted the best fruit Sonoma has. And I apologize to Facebook viewers because you cannot see these questions. So maybe you can hear these questions. We have to figure out a way. Next week, as a matter of fact, I believe we are going to have the opportunity to integrate the questions on the Facebook side of things. We'll give this about 5 more seconds. We've got 58% of the people responding, 66, 4, 3, 2, 1. End the polling. The answer. You wanted the single best expression of Cabernet Sauvignon. Is that true?
It is, but interesting side one. I actually was born in a stagecoach. I wasn't. Sorry, Mum.
No. By the way, we went back and forth on born or conceived. We didn't know what. Please tell me your parents aren't going to see this.
Oh, God, I hope not. Actually, to be fair, they'd love that. They'd find it hilarious.
Well, it's funny because I thought about this question earlier when we were talking. Your dad is now back in Sligo, and he started the business with you, everything that you've been together. Is he super excited and proud of everything you've accomplished so far?
Yeah, I mean, I think so. Like I said, it was one of those fortunate situations where I had one of my ducks in a row in the sense that I had, a great winemaker that was prepared to support me and help me and source great fruit and, make wine and so forth. But of course, it all comes down to the money. And my dad always said to me, I'll support you in anything you do as long as it's something that I want to support you in. But he was incredibly supportive. He saw the passion that I had, and I think he was quite surprised. He knew that I was, I always was interested in education. I was a hard worker in school and university and whatnot. But I think when he saw this passion that I had for wine, which started up, out of something so innocuous as trying to be the guy that picks wine at a dinner, he said, "Wow, this has become, quite intense. That he's really got into it this much." And I think because of that, he said, if you're this into it and you think you can make a career out of this, I'll support you. So yeah, I was incredibly lucky to have parents that
that's great
got behind me and wanted to support me and so forth. And what I will say now is he loves it because he gets to come out here 2 or 3 times a year. My mum doesn't come out as much, unfortunately, she's back in Ireland, but when he does come out, he says, "Oh, Catherine, it's a business trip." She says, "Jerry, come on, it's been 10 years. Who are you trying to kid? You're not doing any business. Paul's doing all the work. you're just going out there to drink loads of great wine. And he goes, no, Catherine, it's a business trip, I swear.
There are worse things to do.
Right, yeah. Well, he enjoys himself, you know, so.
No, that's awesome. So we know Stagecoach was acquired, and we've been fortunate enough to feature a bunch of winemakers that have sourced their fruit there, but we also know that song is going to end at some point in time. And so you're going to be faced with the decision to say, wow, I have built a brand on a fruit source that is unrivaled. I mean, there's 4 or 5 sources in Napa that are pretty similar, or that have that pedigree. I won't say similar topography and climate and microclimate. What do you want to do? How are you searching that next source out, and walk us through that journey?
It's a good question, a very good question, actually, and an appropriate question, because as you said, you know, our time is running out. You know, I feel like I have more time than others in the sense that I had extended contracts with Stagecoach.
Right. Yeah.
You know, I remember signing the contracts when I was doing it, and other friends of mine were, you know, buying fruits at the time, and it was before Go, or I shouldn't say that, E&J, as you were saying, had purchased the vineyards. You know, they like to, you know, do a rolling contracts whereby year by year they'll renew it, just because, you know, they might change their fruit sources. For me, it was a no-brainer. The maize was always going to be Stagecoach. As soon as I tasted the fruit, I fell in love with it. I knew it was going to make this wine. Huh. So I said, right, I'll sign these extended contracts, and I did. And, you know, lo and behold, the situation changed, and it was purchased. And they said, yeah, there you go. And they said, we'll honor existing contracts, and they, to be fair, they have done. I'm still getting fruit from them, and they said we'll keep on going as long as your contract is valid for. And that gives me another 4 years on both my blocks, which is great. 4 years to decide, I guess. 4 years to get 100 points.
Right.
So you've got right now. I haven't found something yet that you know, I'm not happy with. Of course, I'm always checking, and I'm always searching, and I'm always trying to taste fruits and wines from different vineyards. But there's nothing that I've found yet that will replace the Stagecoach. I'm glad I've got 4 years, because I think it's definitely a process, and it's not something that I would like to do overnight.
Right.
But, you know, who knows what's going to happen in the next 4 years. We are a small winery. We are taking small blocks. Who knows? They might turn around and say, just keep what you've got. We don't know. We don't know, is the honest answer. But of course, I'm not also, you know, being, you know, blasé and not going out and, you know, researching what is out there and what could be a replacement. So
that's interesting. And I like it. So what is the last vintage that you have secured through them? And for everyone that, I mean, Paul and I are joking around a little bit, because E&J Gallo purchased Stagecoach from the Krupp brothers in 2017, I think, for $273 million.
Mm-hmm.
And there is no animosity. I will salute the Krupp brothers as long as I'm alive, because they took a tremendous risk in purchasing that property. I think in the late 70s, early 80s.
I believe so, yeah.
It did not have a single vine on it. They cleared it. It had no water. They brought in.
There was no irrigation. There was nothing. Yeah.
Nothing.
There was a rocky pile on top of a mountain, basically.
So they spent a fortune, and they are deserving of a fortune. But,
mm-hmm.
but it is a special place, and so that's why it's interesting to talk about it. How much longer? What is going to be your last vintage there? What year?
I believe our last vintage would be 2024.
Oh wow! Okay, so you've got nothing to worry about. If given your knowledge and the business that you had in Dublin and where
mm-hmm.
you imported wines from and the countries that you worked with, if you could make wine anywhere else in the world, where would you make wine?
That's a great question.
It's not my question. It came in through the chat. Who asked that? Who? Megan V, my sister from another mister.
So I spent a lot of time in South Africa. I was lucky enough to. My parents, they had a home down there, and they're retired. They decided, you know, if we're going to spend 12 months of the year in Ireland, that's a long time in Ireland. You know, it's going to get really cold in winter. So they bought somewhere, you know, down in South Africa, you know, Southern Hemisphere. So it's the upside down kind of climate.
There's warmer places that are a bit closer, but that's okay.
Well, the thing is, the great thing about it was, it's a 10-hour flight, and it's direct south, so there's only an hour time difference.
Well, that's not bad.
No jet lag, and also, in Ireland's winter, it's their summertime, because it's Southern Hemisphere. So they were like, this is perfect. So then we'd go and spend 3 months of the year down there. So I would go and visit, and spend a lot of time down. And that, you know, when I started the wine importing business, the majority of the wines I was importing was actually South African wines.
Really?
I love South Africa because I believe that they are growing most varietals and doing most of them pretty well, but there's certain ones that are quite special to me that they're doing fantastically. I love Chenin Blanc as a white varietal. I think it's so versatile. You can do anything with it. You can have a sweet Chenin Blanc. You can have a sparkling Chenin Blanc. You know, make it a Vouvray. You can have a beautiful still Chenin Blanc. I mean, I think it's fantastic, and I've always wanted to work with Chenin Blanc. So that is something I'm thinking about, maybe doing something out there. The other place I'm thinking about, which I would love to, I've never been to Uruguay, but I am tasting some Uruguayan wines, which are just fantastic. Some of their reds, their climate, their cooler climate down there is just, it's incredible. So that is something I'm interested in. I want to spend more time down there. If, you know, we ever get out of this horrible situation and we can travel again, that'll be my next stop, is Uruguay. So
really interesting. So Uruguayan wines, South African wines, Chenin Blanc, I heard, which it's hard to beat a good Chenin, especially when it's warm. I mean, it's about as the value of that wine is. By the way, side note, yesterday Paul indicated to us during our dress rehearsal that he's been on a 14-day alcohol-free exercise fast. And I just saw him fill up his third glass of wine. So I'm so glad we brought that to a screeching halt.
So I'm doing so well. Tomorrow's going to be a tough day.
I know. I've got an ab workout tomorrow that would make you cry. Actually,
I mean, to be honest, getting out of bed tomorrow is going to make me cry.
So is there anything, I like the topic of conversation with regards to a future wine. Mm-hmm. You've got great fruit source through 2024, so there's not a lot of worries there. You're making a Sauv Blanc, which not many people know about. Yeah. How do people outside of Cellar Angels and what we make available on our website, how do they get your wines?
I would say, you know, we are distributed in a small amount of states. We're not everywhere because I think we don't make that much wine. I don't want to be spread out where I can give each state 20 cases. I work with distributors in states that have supported us from the beginning, that have been really good to us. And when we were small and we were trying to get started and we were trying to get on the map, you know, they
what about on your website? Can they grab it there?
Well, that's a good, I was going to segue into that actually, because we are actually redesigning our website at the moment. So the new website is going to go live. We set up the existing websites, but the new website is going to be much more functional, much more informative, much more engaging. And that's going to go live in about 2 weeks' time. And it's going to coincide with the release of our 2016 vintages of all of our red wines. Our Maize Cab, our Clou Cab, and the Malbec that I kind of hinted at earlier on. So I would say get on the website, sign up for the mailing list, and you'll get updates from us on new vintages, you know, wine club releases. We're about to start a new wine club for the first time ever. We've never had a wine club, so there'll be the opportunity to join 3 different levels of the wine club on the new website. So yeah, I would say in 2 weeks' time, go and check out the website and get on there, and, you know, like I said, definitely at least add your name to the mailing list so I can, you know, include you in updates and whatnot.
And quite honestly, PSA, public service announcement here, don't try to find this wine at a local store. You're not going to find it because it's highly unlikely that you're going to be in one of those states. Go to his website, go to Paul's website in a week or so time, fill out, put your username or just create an email address. It's not difficult. You
can go on the website today and you can add your name to the main list today, and I'll save that within my database. But as I said, the wine website will be better in a couple of weeks and it'll be more, you know, accessible, I should say. But you can certainly add your name. If you want to get on after this call, you can go on and add your email address, and you'll get an update about the new website and the redevelopment and whatnot. So,
and do we have one more question? Or did we answer the last one?
Oh, we got the last one.
I can't remember if we had our third polling question.
Oh, right. We do have a new poll. Yes.
There are 3 bottles of May's 2015 Cabernet Sauvignon remaining on the Cellar Angels website. True or false? This actually could be considered a trick question.
Could be. So I got half of one on my left.
And it's interesting because I'm going to give this 5 seconds left because I already know whoever answered it, I have a sneaking suspicion they chose 63% of the people have responded. Go ahead and end that. Yeah, false, because I bet you that person bought 2 of them.
Oh, right.
That's called influencing the outcome. I like it.
That's a good response. I like that.
Yeah. Okay, so there is, I believe, 1 bottle or maybe no bottles left of the 2015. But as I mentioned, he didn't have to, but he did. Paul graciously said, I can make some 2016 available, but I can only make them available for a short period of time. So for the time being, the 2015, for all intents and purposes, is gone. If there is 1 left, I'd grab it. But I would grab as much of the 2016 as possible because there's not much of it. And I see in the lower comment section a gentleman, Nick Schramm. Cheers, brother.
Guilty.
He says guilty. So good. That's a smart buyer right there. And so if you get an opportunity to get the 2016, grab some of that as well, because as heard, Paul does a lot of it. It's vintage, you know, she's not counting that year, the yield is going to go down.
I honestly, you know, it's hard to say, but I honestly think that the 16 is, you know, it's one of those lauded vintages in Napa. You know, people are going to talk about 16 for years, and I think that somewhat takes away from other vintages because, like I said, 15. My favorite vintages have been 11, which was one of the worst apparently vintages in Napa.
Time out. I freaking love that you just said that.
Okay.
And I'm not kidding you, because when we owned the wine store and we owned a retail store, and you are precisely accurate, the 11 got maligned by the media and all the print publications saying it was a terrible vintage. And we kept telling people, no. There are a lot of producers that made some world-class wines in 11. And when you think about it, there's over 1,000 producers in Napa alone. So you're telling me everyone on the valley floor, everyone on the benchlands, and everyone in the mountains, they all made bad wine? I don't think so. And you're absolutely correct. There's some 11s that are astounding right now.
Absolutely. In my personal opinion, it was the best vintage I ever made. For me, because it was the hardest vintage to make.
Yep.
It was the most like Bordeaux. And for me, when I first started this brand, I wanted to replicate something like Bordeaux, because being a European, what did I grow up drinking when I think of Cab Sauv? Bordeaux. You know, we poured that wine at my brother's wedding. I mean, he had the pick of the bunch, my brother. He could have said, oh, we want this vintage. I gave him all the vintages, and he said, no, we want that one. You know.
That's awesome.
So, yeah, it was the biggest project of mine in terms of the amount of work that went into it, the biggest passion project, but also I just loved it. I thought it was so elegant, and so the alcohol was lower, and it was so Bordeaux reminiscent. It really was.
I was just going to say, it sounds very old world.
It really was. It really was. Like, I've had people taste it, you know, blind tastings, and say, this is a Bordeaux. And I said, no, that's actually Napa. Just because it was that cooler climate, so we picked early, and, you know, the sugars weren't as high when we picked, and it was just, I don't know. I'm geeky now, but
no. That's the romance of wine, and that's why I love the small producer, because what happens each vintage makes such a difference. And you got to roll up your sleeves every spring and get at it and get after it.
That's exactly it. You know, I can actually mentally remember every vintage I've ever had, because I remember, because we are small, you know, so I remember what was different about every vintage, and there's always something that will stand out in my head that made it somewhat different to the last, or, you know, better than the first, or, you know, so it's incredible, you know, and certainly 11 stood out for sure. It was different, you know, and it wasn't just it stood out at the time, it stood out for years afterwards when people complained about it and said it was awful and slammed it and whatever else. And I'm drinking this wine, I'm thinking, this wine's getting better and better every year. I don't know what you're talking about.
No, I'm glad you said that. That's great. And we've got about a couple minutes left. And one of the things I want to say thank you to yourself. I want to say thank you to the creativity you've had with regards to anybody that buys a case, them being able to stay with your parents in County Sligo, I think that's an amazing offer that you've extended. So thank you for that, your mom and dad.
Hold on, let me get the phone. Mum?
Mom, I've got some friends coming over. That's adorable.
Mum, don't freak out. There's a couple of people you got to pick up at the airport.
Yeah. Again, at the end of the day, there are worse things, right? It's wine, it's good people, it's good food. But honestly, in all sincerity, Paul, thanks so much for taking some time today. These are crazy, crazy conditions. It's just an absolute delight to spend an hour with you and shoot the breeze and learn a little bit more about your passion, how you came up through the race. And luck is the residue of hard work. You work enough and good happens. So be healthy, stay safe, and thank you so much. And we're going to bend an elbow soon when we get out to Napa.
Absolutely. And thank you guys for including me in this. And, it's great to reconnect again. It was a fantastic pleasure to work with you guys, in August last year. And so glad we could do it again.
You got it. Cheers or Solancha.
Solancha.
Thank you, brother.